folks, it's Ryan again. I'm here to answer Esther's second big question, which is really about the intersections between traditional professional development and my experience on the journey, and how they speak to each other, and what has been valuable about it. And I have two thoughts here about how the journey has spoke to other professional development and how they've influenced other things that we've done. So the first thing that I want to mention is the perspective piece that I talked about in my first video really plays out most for me. And I think about the design sprints as a perfect example of that, particularly the one that we had in, I think, early 2013. And for me, when I think about how the journey has played out, one of the things that first popped in my head is when we were starting to listen to Regents talk about how they were thinking about redesigning their program. It put me in a place where I was automatically thinking about what are the perspectives that they're thinking about in this process, and it made me realize that a lot of the Regents were coming to these places from a singular perspective, or just a small set of perspectives. And so, the journey really pushed me in that time working with Regents to ask questions, to try and understand what was going on, where folks were coming from when they were thinking about how to design this program, and then to push and say, well, what are the other contexts or perspectives that need to be involved in this process? And I think that has really helped move the conversation forward. In that work in particular, I think that, and I think with the group that I worked with, I think that really pushed them to be more inclusive in their process and in their thinking about that. So I would say that's the first thing, is that the perspective piece really is powerful and plays out in a lot. The second one is really relates to the leadership piece, and what I see here is really it's pushed me to consider my identity and to value the type of leader I am. So I would say I'm more of an introvert, quiet leader, and I would say over living up to the archetype. So it has made me value that more than living up to what either our organization or our society says, or how it sometimes feels what the archetype is for a leader. And that means that plays out in a couple ways. So one, I delegate to a lot of other leaders in special education to do the work that might not be compelling to me, or might not align with the type of leader that I want to be, or might not really develop me in the way that I need development. So it's pushed me to delegate and to find the people that are really compelled by certain types of leadership activities to do that work. I think the second thing is that, I think a lot of you know that I often stay quiet on calls, and I don't always share my perspective vocally, and that's just part of who I am. I've always been taught, I've always felt part of my identity is to be quiet and to listen, and I usually need reflective space, and even then I don't always share what I'm thinking unless I'm asked. And so for me, it's pushed me to think about how do I honor that part of my identity and where it comes from, while also figuring out how to still lead in my work. And so, I think a lot of people, in certain circumstances, I'll send an email now after a call, or I'll reach out to talk independently to one person on the call to try and get more perspective, or to talk about a specific issue. And that's how I operate. It's changed how I operate, and it's pushed me to recognize that I can be a leader while still respecting who I am, just by slightly changing my approach, or asking others to consider those things about my identity in how we approach the work moving forward. So that's the answer to my second question. Thanks, guys.